All right, so we still got to do the intro, right?
All right.
Okay.
So
It's still recording, huh?
yeah, everything's still recording. The mic's still going. So how you guys want to kick it off?
How do we do this? You're right.
You know, it's funny. The whole podcast is the easy part, and then kicking off the intro, it's like
it's the hard part. Okay.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome to our podcast, One True Deen. This is our first episode of this podcast. We actually just finished up a really good conversation. What was the topic, bro?
The topic was about balancing culture and religion, and which ties into living in the world as a young adult in the Western world.
So inshallah, we're gonna try to get episodes out every week.
Inshallah.
This was our first podcast, so we may have a little technical difficulties, but just stay tuned in a couple minutes. We'll go ahead and get into the main discussion. It's a pretty fire conversation, though.
Yeah,
I would say so. Yeah,
very beneficial.
Very
right?
beneficial. I feel like a lot of people can learn from this conversation we had and benefit from it ultimately, and more importantly, because it's an entertaining conversation.
Yep. Just kept it natural. Just went with the flow. So.
Yeah. If you guys have anything to add on too, like type it in the comments.
Yeah, definitely. So we plan on doing a lot of different topics that involve growing up in the West as Muslims.
Yeah.
So if you guys have anything that you guys want to hear us discuss, definitely mention that below. But we have so much to talk about. Like, this was literally the tip of the iceberg. You know what I mean?
Yes. There's a lot of discussions, we can get into.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll hope you enjoy this conversation that we have.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
But today's topic is going to be balancing religion with culture, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think the most important thing is understanding the difference between culture and religion, right?
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
that's something a lot of people get mixed up. So how do you guys feel about that?
I feel like one thing about culture is like a lot of people take that into account for their identity, not the religion, portion. They're like, I'm Pakistani or I'm Arab or something like that. That's more of their identity than the religion is supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's like Muslim is kind of secondary, whereas it's supposed to be first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even in Islam, like the general principle is that like everything in culture is permissible until proven haram otherwise. And all acts of worship are haram until proven like halal. And
Okay.
So
right.
That makes sense. And then another thing with culture, with religion, it doesn't change over time, right?
Yeah.
We were given a revelation. At least for us, it doesn't change over time. We were given revelation from Allah, and our duty is to follow that revelation with unchanged, right? With culture, it's always changing, right? Society, especially here in the West where we're living, I feel like always there's just something changing.
Well, most of our parents, they come from those countries, so they try to. Of course, it makes sense for them when they when they come here and then they have kids. They want to instill those values and stuff. But at the same time, we're American too. We're growing up in a whole different time frame and country, different values and stuff like that. So that's where like the collisions start, because you go home and all the because you go to a public or something like that, you have to kind of behave or act a different way and dress a certain way, you know what I mean?
True.
Whereas you go back home, that doesn't flow, you know what I mean? They make you feel wrong for like trying to you're not necessarily becoming like the West by conforming into their beliefs and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're living in this country. They don't have that experience because they grew up over there.
Man, one thing I'm happy about like living here is that we're not like blinded by culture. Because we live in the West and we see so many other cultures, for us, it's a lot more easier to find the truth than it would be over there. Because there they have to literally like go against norms to sometimes follow the religion. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, for example, with like namaz, like a lot of people say you're supposed to do this, but over there, if you were to do this, some people, and like in Pakistan, for example, some people wouldn't.
They will like I was there in Pakistan a couple of months ago. Remember in the summer?
Yeah.
My cousin literally told me I did it like that, and you know how you go down for sujood.
Yeah.
He literally said, "Don't do that at this masjid. They don't like
exactly.
that." You know
That's
what I mean?
silly,
You see how that sounds?
Yeah, I know.
You know.
And I feel like that even over here, if we have two masjids, right? We have the Arabi masjid, and then we have the Pakistani masjid. So I notice when I do go to the Arabi masjid, I feel more comfortable doing what I do. But each masjid has their own way of doing things. So if you do one thing a certain way at a masjid here, they're going to tell you how they want to do it. And then if you go to another masjid here, they're going to tell you how they want to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's where it can become a little, say, you know how we come from a Pakistani background, we go do that stuff, do the same things that we do with the Pakistanis, you do it at the Arab masjid. You know, they're not necessarily going to look at you different. It's just they're not used to seeing that. So then they're going to be like, okay, no, do it this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's true.
And vice versa.
Culture especially, though, is more... it's mainly from the elders, man, that like for us it gets hard because the elders are so like glued on to their cultural values that sometimes it's like we don't have...
They get blinded. We shouldn't be
forced to like follow through with their ways, especially if it goes against the religion. Yet if we do, you know what I mean? Like, for example, like with the beard, right? My mom says don't keep the beard because none of your relatives or something like that do that. But now the religion says keep the beard. So then which one do I follow? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff like that, man.
And we've experienced that firsthand, right? Because we all have older generational Pakistani parents. And we know that even if when we follow the sunnah, there's still things that they want us to do differently. Sadly, it's a sad truth, but it's true. So I feel like in the future, that's something I definitely...
It's like, my bad. It's like they pick and choose like what works in their favor. Like, for example, you know, they think that, you know, especially in terms of parents, like, you know, you're not supposed to say even oof to them, you know, but at the same time, you're supposed to treat your children with, you know, respect, listen to how they're feeling. But, you know, in the households that we grew up in, we can't really tell our parents how we feel, you know, because they just kind of shrug it off, laugh it off. You know what I mean? They don't take that kind of stuff into account, into serious, you know?
Yeah, and that's like more with the emotional health. And I feel like that's a good topic to get into too, for another day.
Yeah, for another day, though.
But definitely it does affect, you know, your mental health. And
with the more like cultural masjids too, I noticed too, it's harder for like reverts to enter them. Like your brother was telling me too, like he knows a revert. And when they came into that, like to certain masjids, it's harder for them because it's so like culturally bound that if they need like a more, I would say, like, what's the word, like a variety. What do you call it?
Variety. Yeah.
Like a masjid that has more variety in it. Like
more diversity. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it makes it easier on them.
It makes it easier to, you know, not necessarily fit in, but be more welcome and be more accepted. You know?
with the culture, you know, with our culture, this topic has to do with balancing religion with culture, right? Yeah. And diversity plays a very important part in that, especially for us since we live in the West. I feel like diversity is something we all have to get used to. Accepting one another regardless of race, color, anything like that, because you know Allah says in the Quran too, you know, we've created you in tribes, you know, everybody's created differently. It's not like we're all going to be the same. So for us to make that next step in believing in balancing religion and culture, you need to be able to accept diversity and accept other people.
Yeah. So on the other hand of things too, though, not all of culture is bad too, you know what I mean? At some point too, we also need to preserve our culture to an extent too, because I don't want like our future generations to completely forget about like everything about our culture. Because there are good things too within our culture too. You know, definitely. Like our hospitality. Like Pakistanis are known for having like a very hospitable like environment. You know, the list goes on. You know.
No, of course, I understand. You know,
language too. You know, like preserving our like language too. It's very sad to see like kids these days not knowing how to speak like Inko or Urdu or nothing like that. It's just English stuff. You know what I mean?
Okay. So let me give you a question about that then.
Yeah.
Culture and tradition, right? Now you genuinely, you go like in a Pakistani household, for example. I'm sure like you ever notice that the little stereotype of like, you know, the Muslim boys like being able to get away with whatever, you know what I mean? Like, oh, he's a boy, you know, he could do whatever he wants. Now, the same girl in that same household, they try doing the same thing. And, oh, she ruins the family name. You know what I mean? Something like that. So that's where like the culture, that's where like the culture part really stands out, because it's like you're letting one get away with one thing and then the other not. She's gonna ruin the name, but it's like in the religion it says it doesn't matter whether you're man or woman. You sin, you're sin.
It's an equal sin. Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's an equal sin, regardless whether you're a man or you're a woman.
Yeah, with the woman, it's always like an honor thing. You know what I mean? If a woman messes up, oh, now our honor's on the line. Now, whereas if a guy messes up, it doesn't hit as deep for them, I guess.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, he's a man.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know
but religiously, no, it's all the same. You know?
Right, exactly. And then that's where like you have that whole imbalance of culture and religion.
Exactly, and that's exactly where you start letting reputation influence religion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not what we want. For us, the deen comes before anything, even if it means our reputation, so-called,
so-called reputation, you know what I mean? That's just more of like our people caring more about what others are gonna think in every regard. You know what I mean? They don't. It's not more about like, oh, okay,
what should we do according to the followings of our Prophet
Muhammad sallallahu or the Quran and Hadith, but it's more like, oh, okay, what if we do this? What is he or she gonna say? What is that family gonna say?
Exactly.
100%. It's like competing too with other families too. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like hidden competition.
Like, especially for like marriages too, man. That's
a whole different. That's a whole different subject. Like we could get in depth into that. Subject, you know what I mean?
Yeah. With this topic, I feel like there's so much to talk about, right? Culture, because culture is implemented in every single part of our life, whether it be marriage, work, school, whatever, the way you dress, right? And
even like you notice that even within our own within our own Pakistani community, there's still separation. They're like, oh, he's a Punjabi, he's a Pathan, he's from what's it called? He's a Atak, you know what I mean? Like, are you serious? Like, at the end of the day, it's like we're all Pakistani, you know? What difference does you being from this area mean to me, you know?
The thing with divisions is, like, when you divide people, right, they're eventually going to form their own divisions, and it just comes to a point where it's like, you know what I mean?
It's just, it's all about brotherhood, you know what I mean? And you're kind of, there's that boundary, there's that line of brotherhood that you're crossing, you know what I mean? That you're not making another person feel welcome just because, or you make them feel like they're less than compared to you or not as good just because they're from a different area. That doesn't make no sense.
Yeah, no, that's,
Yeah,
all that is true.
I feel like that's a problem that's more towards our older generation culture. But as like us now, you know what I mean? Like the newer generation, growing up within the West, they don't really see that. They don't really care. You notice it, which is a great thing. You know what I mean?
One thing too, though, when it comes to like, what like culture, the issue is too, is if you're only like Muslim because of your culture, and now your kids are like that. The thing is, with their kids' iman, it's gonna be very bad, man. Because if you're living in the West and the only reason like you're Muslim is because I'm Pakistani and my mom's Muslim and my dad's Muslim, now I'm gonna be Muslim. Exactly. That kind of mindset, man, will not you won't last in this day and age.
It's just like you're Muslim you're Muslim by name, you know what I mean? By birth. Like it's not like they don't practice none of the religion. That's where like you see the problem is those type of people though, when they get older and older, they start having like, what do they call it? Like midlife identity crisis. They're like, what's my purpose in life? You know, what am I doing? You know, and you don't want to be in that situation. Like it's very concrete of what our purpose is.
Yep.
You know, what are our boundaries, what we can do, what we can't do, how we can generate income, stuff like that. It's all written right there. It's just us, we complicate it. You know what I mean? True, and that goes back to like, oh, what is he going to say? Like, what if I do it? Like, you know, this is a whole, such a broad spectrum of ideas, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think though, now that, because like, earlier, me and Donish were speaking about this too, and he said that right now, like within our generation, we live in that gap where it's like between like heavy cultural influence and like between like trying to have like that pure understanding of the religion, right? We live in that generational gap. So like within our like future generations, I hope they don't have to like experience that like divide, you know what I mean?
Exactly, because even when we were going to school, you know, we have to admit, at least for me, when I was in high school, I wasn't focused on the deen, bro.
Yeah.
That was like one of the last things I was focused on. I always called myself a Muslim by name, but the deen, as far as going out of my way to discover and learn about the Deen, I didn't really do that after masjid school, right? During those high school years. Those are really those years, especially for kids, you know, in America, where you start kind of worrying about other things and not the Deen. So after high school for me is when it really hit me, like, you know, when I started hanging around different people, my own religion, people, you know, Muslim people, that's when I was like, you know, there is a purpose, you know, to life. And I always knew that, I just never applied myself. So when it comes to balancing culture and religion, that's one thing that I feel like is very important, is who you hang around.
Yeah.
Because when I was hanging around people who weren't Muslim in school, you know, there was nobody to tell me to pray Salah, you know?
Yeah.
You know, was there like how you tell us sometimes, like, you know, we should pray.
Yeah.
So there was nobody back then like that. If anything, I was focused away from what I believe in, right? So it's a lot about who you hang around with too, that really can determine that balance you have, right, between culture and religion.
No, that's one other thing too. It's important to have a sense of cultural values and traditions, because like in this environment, you're in high school, right? 14, you're in there from when you're 14 to 18 years old. And, you know, we live in such a diverse community, which is a very great thing, don't get me wrong. But who's to say, like you said, who you hang out with does make a big difference. It'll subconsciously affect you, you know what I mean? You're going to start picking up on their habits and traits, even if you don't want to.
And I think we all did that at one point, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's because, you know, you're in this environment in high school or whatever, where you're trying to fit in, you're trying to conform to these people, you know what I mean? Even though you can tell yourself no matter how many times, oh, I don't want to fit in, to an extent, you always will want to fit in. You know what I mean? You're going to want to have that some sort of, even if you don't want to fit in, you want to have some sort of social acceptance. You know what I mean? Like, whether that be through the way you dress, the way you act, who you hang out with, you want that validation to an extent, you know? I'm not saying that's everybody, but especially during that time, 14 to 18, you're in high school, you're in that kind of vulnerable state of mind.
I definitely wanted that, the social acceptance, you know? One point in life, like, that's all, you know, really
I feel
focused
like,
on.
I think because we grew up in the West too, unfortunately, some of us do have like an inferiority complex too. You know what I mean? We want to be so much like the other. You know, we want to be like everyone else. All that in our culture. Oh, we're so backwards, this and that, stuff like that. When in reality, you know, that's not true at all. You know? Yeah. That's why I think like it's important to like the good aspects of our culture. We should preserve. We should pass it on. For example, language, food. Hospitable traditions, etc., etc.
How we interact with others, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think if we can get like this together, we can feel more united upon religion, then it's gonna translate into like bettering our communities overall, even like here, even in our countries, like outside the U.S., all of that. You know what I mean?
Well, it starts within our own self. You see,
exactly.
Look, I mean, I'm not saying we're like these perfect youth people, you know what I mean? Like, we all make our mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, the current state of the youth, you know, we have to watch out for them, you know? Because we have to make sure that they not only preserve, you know, their own culture and stuff like that, but most importantly, their religion. You know what I mean? Because look in the time that we're living in today. Look at what they're teaching in schools. Look at the picture they paint on us. Pakistanis, Muslim, Afghani, it doesn't matter who you are. Now, when you see stuff like that, when you're always constantly seeing that in your head, to an extent, you're not going to want to, you're going to be afraid to tell people, I'm Muslim. You should never be afraid to tell anybody that you're Muslim.
Right.
Or tell them that, oh, I'm a Pakistani. You know what I mean? Or I'm this.
We have to accept the fact that we're different, because as Muslims in the United States, we're probably always going to be a minority, right?
Targeted.
Yeah, and we've always been targeted. And I think it was hard for us when we were young to accept the fact that we're different, and we wanted to try so hard to fit in and be just like everybody else. But
the crazy thing is, no matter how much you try to fit in, you could do everything these other people. At the end of the day, they're going to point their finger at you. They're going to be like, you're still a Muslim. You know what I mean? You'll never be able to fit in with us no matter how much you try.
At the masjid too, the sheikh that came over, he said the same thing. He said to like time and time again, Muslims have compromised. They've even went as far as sell out their religion, right? And even still then, like the non-Muslims are treating us bad. In France, for example, I mean, I don't need to go into what's going on there, but even in like other countries, you know, Muslims have conformed. Some of them have even flat out, like you can't even tell they're Muslim no more. But even then, they're still painted with that same like bad label. And this is like from the religion perspective too. Like there's a hadith that says that like if you try to please others at the displeasure of Allah, Allah's gonna be displeased with you, and He's gonna make everyone else displeased with you. You know what I mean?
Right. SubhanAllah, yeah.
You might as well just follow like what the religion says. You know?
I agree with you on that. But you know, it all just, you know, it all kind of boils down to the environment. So look at the environment. You know, it's a difficult environment that we live in. The thing is, this is the gap between us and our parents too, because they grew up in a different country. They grew up in a Muslim environment. You know, they come here.
Yeah.
They're not gonna. No matter how much they try to relate to us, they're never gonna truly be able to. Because you know they won't understand. Yeah. They weren't high school students here. They don't go to college here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They'll try to tell you from their point of view, but like, oh well, when I was your age, this was not an issue for me, you know. I was doing this, but then they'll try to make you feel bad about it. But it's like you don't understand this type of stuff we go through.
We're in a whole different country now. You know, it's not like how it used to be back in the day. Everything's harder. Finding a job is harder. Getting into school is harder.
That's a whole different subject in itself. If we're gonna be honest, because here they try to tell you, oh, you didn't make that top school, like you're a failure. You know what I mean?
Too, like for example, someone trying to be a doctor nowadays, they think it's all grades, but man, it's not the same no more. Grades are like an expectation nowadays.
You know what's crazy?
You have like extracurriculars, this and that.
Yeah. I mean, that's besides the point. But you see how that ties into culture.
How so?
You like what do you call it? Because in our households, they make you believe that stuff. You know what I mean? They try to
make you good grades. All the doors are
right.
True, good grades help.
I understand that, but like you know, there's more to success in life than just getting good grades in school. You know, going to a good college, and that's that. I'm gonna be honest with you. My mom and dad, they always told me good grades are the success to life. They never told me that, oh, read the Quran and study your religion, you will find more peace in that.
Has your parents ever told you to like read like a translation of the Quran once?
No.
Never,
Honestly, no.
And I was going to bring that up right now too, is we all went to Quran class, right?
Yes.
Have any of your teachers or whoever was teaching you, did they actually translate for you? Because they didn't translate for me. I learned the Quran. I was really good, you know, with the tajweed and everything, but then when it came to the translation, I didn't learn any of that till I started seeking it for myself.
Right. I'm gonna be honest, my sheikh personally, because you know he's from an Arab background, so because he knew I could read it really well, and he taught me the tajweed, but he said, okay, but you got to know what you're reading. Now you go read the English translation. I'm gonna read you this ayah and you tell me what this means. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that he did that for me. But alhamdulillah. But like at the household, no.
Yeah, and I feel like the majority of the Pakistani community, for us in our culture, we don't get to learn that
we don't emphasize it
because I didn't.
No,
I don't know if you did.
They don't.
I had online Quran school, so I was lucky.
Because I went through a Pakistani course, right? All the people who taught me were Pakistani. My grandpa taught me as well. He was Pakistani. He never taught me the tajweed.
No,
I just learned. I was very good. I was very good with the tajweed, but I wasn't good with understanding what I was reading.
Yeah,
right.
Because the Quran was sent down not just to recite without knowledge. It was sent literally as guidance. But how can I be guided if I don't know what's being stated in it?
Mm-hmm. And that's where religion gets lost within culture.
Yeah, that
point that we're bringing up, because if you're reciting something that you don't know, you don't even know what you're saying, how are you going to be able to implement that into the deen? I mean?
Even namaz. To this day, there's Muslims that are like, 50 and they don't even know what they're saying. They're just saying, alhamdulillah.
So that's what I'm scared of. Like every day, like I'm always learning, trying to read more, trying to understand more. You know, it's just like, I just don't want to die knowing that I didn't know, I missed a part of the Quran that I shouldn't have, you know? So that's where we got to keep reading, reread the translations, read the Quran in Arabic, but definitely read it in English, so you know what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that all goes back to us doing our part and doing the best that we can. Because just because we can't understand the language of Arabic doesn't mean that we can't find a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to benefit
You
from
that's
it.
that's where you got to implement yourself. And we're adults.
Yeah,
we find a way. Allah has given us
yeah.
plenty of different ways.
And today with the internet, man, like knowledge at our fingertips.
See, that's what helped me, man. Was
Yeah,
the
without
internet.
the internet,
I'm gonna
man.
be honest with you.
People look at the internet like something so evil, and it can be, but like, man, there's a lot of good in it too.
Yeah, it depends how you use it.
Yeah.
So.
Now I'm not gonna lie, man. Without the internet, I probably would be lost, bro. Like.
Well, yeah, to an extent. I mean, because thankfully we're growing up in a time where it's at the tip of our fingertips.
Man, and sometimes you're not even trying to access it. Even on like my Islamic page on Instagram, I like everything that I like is Islamic content, right?
Yeah.
It's weird. As soon as I pop up on my feed, my For You page, there's always something there that's not even related to what I like. And that's what I mean. Like, you don't even have to go out of your way to look for it, and it'll be there.
Yeah.
Sadly. Huh?
No, I mean, absolutely. Because look at the society that we're living in. They're prioritizing and glamorizing this kind of content over everything else. You're starting to see that religious aspect. Doesn't matter whether you're Muslim, Christian, or whatever. Like, that type of content is slowly, like less and less it shows up. And then you notice too, like, say you try to like put something like that or in your bio or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Instagram will try to take it down.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I was posting a few stuff, they took a lot of stuff.
Or they'll like, I'll post like a regular photo, good amount of views. Post something related to like something religious, right?
Yeah.
I'd say less than half those regular views I get. Yes, it's like that.
You know what? That happens to me too. And you know when that really happened to me was when the whole situation with Palestine was going on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's when it really hit.
Man, I remember I posted like something on my story one day, and it was an unbelievable amount of like super low views. And I was like, it's not that I care about views, but I do want people to know what's going on. So to an extent in this situation, I did care about it. Mm-hmm. And it was like, bro, the views were so low. I was just in shock. So I know that they're doing something. There's some kind of
something behind the scenes that we don't know about. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, that's again, like we said, this is a whole different topic. You know what I mean? Like we're like, we could get into the meat of that conversation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I was bringing that up too. Is that this topic? The thing about it, the reason why it's so hard to stay on track is because this topic applies to everything in life, right?
Yes.
So we got to go back to the basics and ask ourselves how can we actually prioritize our religion over our culture, right?
Mm. And also you got to ask, like, for like a very like cultural Muslim, you got to ask him like, why are you a Muslim? And like, you know what I mean? And he'll probably feel ashamed saying like, oh, it's because I was born a Muslim. You know what I mean? No one wants to like say they're Muslim because of that, So if you don't want to say that, then like seek more knowledge, look into the religion.
Unfortunate truth is that's the case for the majority. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You asked them, it's like, okay, like, well, if you were born into this religion, have you really done anything that some of these people, they'll pray the salah or whatever. They don't even know what to read in the salah. Or you ask them, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? They'll kind of like
nowadays, man.
You gotta have this basic knowledge.
Yeah.
And but then like when it comes to their cultural history, like, oh, what date on what time did this event happen? They'll be like,
that's true here too. Even for like Western Muslims too. Now you can ask them like, how many like Drake songs do they know? Like 15? 20?
Oh man.
Can you ask them like, they'll know everything about what's going on with like Kanye or whatever, but they don't know any like basic history of Islam. Like one time I knew this guy, right? He didn't even know where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born at.
Where?
He didn't know where. So I was like,
well,
it was like that, man.
I mean,
it sounds crazy.
Yeah. It's like it's not like we're trying to bombard them and act like, oh, what's wrong with you? But it's like you gotta have basic knowledge,
Yeah,
that's why. That's why you have these kids go to these masjid classes, so they could soak in that information. Because if you try to, because the thing is, you got to instill this kind of stuff in them when they're young. Mm-hmm. Now, a 7-year-old, it's easier to make them go to the masjid and they learn for them there.
15-year-old, yeah. And this is what the sheikh was saying too. Like like Sheikh Fahmy was saying once, right? He was saying like parents always come to him and like their child's like 18, 16, right? And they're complaining saying, my child never prays. Well, he said, well, were you telling him to pray when he was like 6 or 7 or 8? No. Like, you know, for 18 years, he's never prayed. Now all of a sudden you expect him to become like Sheikh al-Islam. Like, it's not.
Yeah. So,
you gotta like, yeah.
And you have to realize that as soon as your kid is born, right?
Yeah.
You have to switch gears. And if you're not on the deen, your kid's not going to be on the deen.
You can't expect them to be on the deen.
So once your kid is born, you know, you shouldn't even be having kids if you can't follow the deen yourself, because your kid's going to be lost, right? Let's be honest. I mean, I highly believe this is that if you're a Muslim and you're lost, I believe you, and you actually do believe in what we believe in, you should seek knowledge for yourself before having a kid, so you can pass that knowledge on to your kid. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that you shouldn't have kids, but I'm saying you shouldn't have kids if you yourself do not have knowledge of the deen, and you know you're not going out of the way to implement.
You know, you bring up a really good point too. It's like you got to be careful, like. That's why you got to be strong on where you're getting your own resource and information from, because like, you know, if these kids try to seek it out like in their schools and stuff, they try to ask their teacher like, oh, Islam, and some of these people will really be like, oh, it's a barbaric religion, you're being oppressed, like, you know, especially the girls, you know. Like, oh, you're wearing the hijab, take that off, you know. So, you know, it's a whole spectrum.
So in a way too, our culture here also impacts, like, not even Pakistani culture now, or like you know, even like Western culture is like, it can, like, you know, pollute us too.
Western culture is basically, they're trying to, their main thing is, you notice, is to liberate everybody. You live however you want. There is no such thing as boundaries. If you have boundaries, there's something wrong with you. Religion, what's that?
Why do you think, you know, the divorce rate here is so high, right? Single parents in the U.S., isn't it higher than in any other country?
That's pretty high,
right?
It's higher than any other country.
They say
you
too,
go
like,
anywhere
women
else.
here are more like, in like westernized countries, women are more depressed here than they are in like in what's it called, Eastern countries.
No, you see it all the time. You know, they're on the gram or whatever, they'll act like, oh, living up my best life, and then behind closed doors, you know, it's a whole different story. Why? Because it's like a temporary taste of happiness you get, but you will never be truly happy. You know. Like you hear these people all the time. They'll tell you, they'll be like, I got tired of doing this, but they can't stop. Why? Because they're in that cycle, and this is they keep like fiending for that same little pleasure that they had the first time they did doing it.
What you're basically saying is, like, no matter who you are, you're going to be a slave to something. Some people are a slave to their ancestors and their cultures and their traditions. Some are a slave to, you know, their desires, and that's how it is.
But, you know, you should really only be a slave to, you know, the one above.
Of course. So,
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, you know, he's the one that, you know, created the book. So you're questioning the creator on how to live your life. Once you start doing that, downhill from there. You're taking a 180 right there.
Well, yeah, but it depends what kind of terms you put that in, because it's okay to question.
No, of course.
Sometimes I had questions, you know, when I was young too. I think we all had questions, and I wouldn't necessarily call them doubts, but we did have certain suspicions that we always wanted answered.
Well, of
and
course.
That's where our job comes in, to actually do the research and discover the truth. We can't just let those thoughts linger in our head, but at the same time, we can't just completely shift gears and, you know, forget our faith. So that's where we have to actually go out, do the research, and
ask the right people too, though.
Definitely.
Don't just go around, like, really look at information.
You have to make sure that where you're getting your information from is solid. You know, you talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
Go to the right
Not
people.
somebody who talks from emotion and bias. You know what I mean? Who picks and chooses. Because the minute that happens,
we have a lot of groups like that in Stockton. Not to name any names, but. We've seen them.
I mean, you know, even then, it's just like you yourself, you need to go seek the truth yourself.
You
know, take one step at a time.
I think you guys wrapped it up pretty well, though. I think that's all very solid points we all made.
So what would you guys say is probably some good solutions to or some good ways to kind of prioritize religion over culture? Just to wrap it up, kind of.
That's a good question.
For me, I think one thing, this isn't very, very important, but I feel like it has a lot to do with the people you hang out with, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, because when I wasn't around Muslim crowds when I was in my teens, and it affected me heavily. So, and those years when you're in middle school and high school, that's when you're the most easily affected. So,
influence,
I think, definitely. So, I think that the people who you hang around with have a lot to do with being able to balance that, because there's always going to be somebody there to, there for you, to offer you salah or offer you the ways of, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, that's one point, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, no, you start.
I would say you should have a basic understanding in the Quran. I don't mean just like reciting it. I mean like reading a translation and having a tafsir of it, having a basic understanding of the seerah, and then having like a basic understanding of like what hadith is and all these things. Have a basic understanding of your religion, because man, subhanAllah, there's so many people I know today that don't even know like the difference between like what really a hadith is, or like they don't even know like the basics of the seerah. So just know the basics of your religion at a young age.
Yep. And at this day and age, definitely there's no excuses for you not to be able to, like we were saying earlier, that information is at the tip of your fingertips. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not a question of how you can find the information.
Are you willing to?
Yeah, it's about, are you willing to find the information? So definitely 100%. I like your point about that, is basic understanding.
Because if you do that, you can filter anything like that comes from the culture too that goes against the religion. You know what I mean? Because there's so many people that think because it's from Pakistani culture, it must be right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, absolutely. You
got any pointers to that, Shayan?
Or you just agree with?
I feel like one other important thing too, is for young adults to do, is have like a balance. You know what I mean? Take have a portion of your time where you dedicate to strictly learning about your religion. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Have like a hobby. A hobby you do on a consistent basis. A good hobby that doesn't go against
working out,
reading, something like that to keep you on your toes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and then the same thing, make sure you have your priorities intact. If you're going to school, focus on that.
Watch for your loved ones.
Watch for your loved ones. Establish a good relationship with your family. And establish, most importantly, a relationship with your creator and the masjid, your local masjid too. And get in contact with the people over there.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone should be close to their masjid, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I really like your point though, balancing out throughout your day, the things you do. That definitely has an impact, because we can't, when this actually goes back to the point we were just talking about, is you're always a slave of something, right?
Yeah.
But even if you're a slave of something to an extent that's materialistic, and I'm not saying it's right, but if you take the time out of your day to follow, maybe read Quran or something, it'll kind of keep you, it'll keep you away from getting lost completely.
It'll keep you in check.
It'll keep you in check, and definitely eventually, inshallah, you'll realize, what you're doing is.
Yeah. It's like, you keep falling into like a dark hole, but then, you got something pulling you back, you know what I mean?
There's still that rope there,
there's still that rope there,
Because, if we're being honest, none of us are perfect.
We're
all
absolutely
like, man, so.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah, we all make mistakes, and pretty much.
I think that's a good way to wrap up.
That was
our topic.
That was actually a great discussion for our first podcast.
Yeah, I know.
I'm pretty happy.
I'm pretty happy. Nervous.
It was actually a really good. I think the end result. I think a lot of people will find this hopefully enjoyable. I really think, man. Inshallah,
yeah, man. It's a little overwhelming. I'm not gonna lie. Right at first,
it is, but then it's like once you get into the flow of things, it's
yeah.
really. I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed my. Talk. I enjoy listening. It's just a really good time.
Yep, and we have natural conversations like this all the time. It's just all of a sudden when the mics are in front of us, it's like, oh man,
because you gotta put on spot.
You gotta force it out, man. But alhamdulillah, we didn't have to force anything out.
No, this is all. So. Yeah, it's just I even forgot that the camera.
Yeah, me too. It's very casual. I don't even know if we're still recording, but it looks like we are. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up then.
Yep, this sounds good. Okay, assalamu alaikum.